Welcome to Veteach, the continuation of the series of my lecture. Today onwards, we will go for the continuation of that series of the lecture, that is to be secondary data. What is meant by the secondary data? So, secondary data are those the data which already available so for some purpose and that may be used for the present study. So, this is called as the secondary data. So, secondary data are those the data which is to be already collected for any purpose, that is some collection of the how many peoples are to be available in our Andhra Pradesh and also how many peoples are to be available in that India. So, like that the census information is to be gathered. So, the data is to be collected that is to be available. So, that is to be collected from some purpose only, but that study we can utilize for our study only. So, that is called as to be the secondary data. So, how this secondary data is to be available? The sources of the secondary data is, there are the various sources are to be available for the collection of the secondary data that should be categorized into the two parts. One is to be from published sources and unpublished sources. For example, if a researcher has to be published some of the papers in his area, so suppose the new coming researchers are to be to collect that data, whatever he invented. So at present only, so whatever the data, so that is to be useful. So in his current research area, so that is to be collected from the published data and also to be unpublished sources. So published sources means various governmental and international and local agencies publish the statistical data and chief among them are also. So likewise and international, there are so many publications are to be there. One is to be international publications and another is to be national publications, like that. So international publications means the international agencies and the international bodies publish regular and occasional reports of economic and statistical matters. There are IMF and IBRD and AFE, like that, and also ENV, etc. So these are the separate bodies and the agencies are to be regularly they publish quarterly or half yearly or yearly. So they release the data of regarding the statistical matters and economic times. Likewise, the events are to be published in that agencies. So for our research, so we have to collect that data. So from that sources are to be available here. Next one, the official publications of central and state governments. So here the departments of the union and the state governments regularly publish the reports on a number of the subjects. They gather additional information. Some are RBI bulletin and the census of India, statistical abstract of states and agricultural statistics of India and Indian trade journals, etc. Likewise, all these are to be organized by either the state governments or the central governments, like that. So and also they release some of the data so regularly. So from that also we can collect the secondary data also. Next one, semi-official publications. So here in that semi-government and institutions like municipal corporations and the district boards and panchayatis, etc. publish the reports also regularly or quarterly or half yearly or yearly. Next one, publications of research institutions. So rather than that whatever from the government and semi-governments, so other than that the research publications, they publish the data. So separately they are having the institutions, likewise Indian Statistical Institute, that is to be ISI, Indian Statistical Institute, that is situated at Kolkata, and also Indian Council of Agricultural Research. So this is called as ICAR. They are separating governing bodies only. So and also Indian Agricultural Statistics Research Institute, that is IASRI. So etc. are to be published and finding of their research programs also. So regularly they are publishing the data. So we can collect that data. So for our research purpose only. Now, so publications of commercial and financial institutions. So how these publications can have strengthened along according to the finance institutions, that is to be reports of various committees and the commission appointed by the government. So for example, so this is the pay commission and also land reforms committee. So and also for example, that is Vanku commission report on the taxation, that is income taxes, and the pay commission. Likewise, there are to be governed by the government of India or the state government. So they are also published some of the data. So like that, this is the source of the secondary data. And also another source of the data is to be journals and the newspapers. So present whatever the current events are to be there, so those are to be published on the newspapers that had collected from the information also for getting the secondary data. So current and important materials of the statistics and the socio-economics problems can be obtained from the journals and the newspapers like Economic Times, Commerce Capital and Indian Finance, monthly statistics of the trade, etc. Likewise, these are the journals are to be available, publish the secondary data. And also these are only regarding about the published data only. Next one, unpublished sources is also to be there. So these are various sources of unpublished data. These records are to be maintained by the various governments of India and also the state governments. The researches are carried out by the individual research scholars in the universities or the research institutes. So the precautions in the use of the secondary data to collect the data, what the precautions you have to consider. So before using the secondary data, the investigators should consider the following factors. The first one is the suitability of the data. So the investigators has to take the given information is to be suitable to our research or not. We have to identify that one. The investigators must satisfy him that the data is to be available or suitable for the purpose of inquiry. So it can be judged by the nature and scope of the present inquiry with the original inquiry. Okay, like that, whether how much data is to be useful, so for our purpose only. So like that, so this is the major condition that may be applied, that is to be whether the suitability of the data. Second one is adequacy, that is sufficient of the data. How much data is to be useful for our purpose only. Okay, if the data are suitable for the purpose of the investigation, then we must consider whether the data are useful, adequate for the present analysis. So for our research, how much data is to be required, so to do the research, so that information is to be regarding about adequacy or the sufficiency of the data. And the third important content is to be reliability of the data. Whether we can collect the information, so from the agencies or the newspapers or from the other governing bodies that is to be appointed by the central governments and the state governments. So what the information is to be given to us, how much reliability is to be there, how much data is to be reliable, this information is to be required. So for that plays an important vital role for collection of the secondary data. The reliability of data can be tested by finding out the agency that collected such data. If the agency has used proper methods in collecting the data, statistics may be relied upon. Okay, like that, how much reliability is to be there, so that information is to be required. So these are the major factors to play an important vital role for the precautions what had to consider from the, we can collect the data, secondary data from the agencies. Now, so we'll go for the merits and the demerits of the secondary data. The merits of the secondary data is to be, it can be adopted in those cases where the informants are illiterates. This is not possible for if the informants, whatever the we are asking the questions, the investigator asking the questions, if the person is not studying well, so what is to be he is asking and he does not know, so if he is to be illiterate. So this is the main for that purpose only. In that case, the secondary data is to be useful. And also the problem of non-response is avoided as the enumerators go personally to obtain the information. Suppose if the informants does not give the such a type of the information, so that is not reliable, so the enumerators go personally and please collect the data from the informants. Okay, and also the third method is to be, the method is very useful in extensive inquiries and can lead to fairly reliable results. Next one, the fourth one is the identity of the respondent is known, which is not always clear in case of a questionnaire. So whenever the questionnaire is to be asking the questions, so always the respondent is not clear. So in that case also, so the secondary data is to be useful for collecting the data. Now, what are the demerits? The demerits of the secondary data is to be collection. That is, the method is very expensive, as enumerators are generally paid persons. Because the enumerators has to be the paid persons only, this is to be very expensive. Money has to be spent and also training them. So we have to train them, the investigators. So after that, so they will go to the investigators. They will go to the investigators and collect the data. This is the time-consuming process and also the money-waste process. And the second one is, if the investigator is not good, so in an investigation, most of the information collected by him may be unreliable. Suppose if the investigator is not a reliable person, then so he may wants to the data from the persons, so that information is not reliable. So this is the main demerit of the collecting the secondary data. Next one, the third demerit is to be, since the investigator is present, when the respondent is given the answers, the respondent may not give the answers to some personal questions freely. Suppose if the investigator may be asking the personal questions to the respondents, so he is not giving the correct information to the investigator. This is also the main drawback. So in that case only, so that means this is can go for a collection of the data from the secondary sources only. So up to now, these are the merits and the demerits of the secondary data. So definitely one question is to be asking in this the theory content, that is, what is the major difference between the primary data and the secondary data. So this is the main question is to be asking, especially in the first unit. Okay, thank you.